Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your co-host, Daniel Torres. Before we start, wanted to thank the 11,000 followers, 11,000 plus followers on LinkedIn. You can also find us on Instagram to stay up to date with our bi-weekly episodes with leaders of the consumer goods and retail industry. Accompanied today by Efrain Rosario. Hi, Efrain, how are you?
Hey, Daniel. Nice to be with you as always.
Likewise, and excited to be speaking about the outdoors space now that we're in the middle of winter. Not that it's a winter thing only.
Well, we're recording this and we're past January, Daniel. So that in and of itself should be something we celebrate.
But this is like the coldest time of the year here in Barcelona, supposedly, while I'm saying that it's 15 degrees. But anyway.
Yeah, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy from us in the Northern Europe parts of the world.
Which is the majority of our audience. So, hi, guys. So, talking about the outdoor space, so it's a constellation really of like larger brands, but also a lot of smaller ones that are very vibrant. Some have a huge history and legacy, and some are newer, but at the end, they're sharing the same stores and very dedicated consumers, right?
No, agreed. And, what's fascinating about a lot of the brands in this space is that from a retail footprint and route to market standpoint, they kind of cover all ends of the spectrum, right? In that, in some ways, a lot of them have been able to build up their business through highly convenient retail channels like direct to consumer, D2C, where on the other hand, a lot of those same brands are also very dependent on like a high touch type of retail environment, which is like specialty stores, right? So I think, like everything, the answer kind of lies somewhere in between in terms of both of those ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, so our guest today, David Pivk, is heading up both marketing and direct-to-consumer at one of the big players in the outdoor space, Active Brands, and very keen to talk to him to understand his experience in the apparel industry with Nike and how he sees this divide between the more traditional independent stores and the whole new world of direct-to-consumer.
Hello, my name is David Pivk, and I'm currently the Chief Marketing and Digital Officer at Active Brands.
David, thanks for joining us. I guess, like we were talking just before we started recording that I don't think we're very far from each other here in Amsterdam, so we're actually quite close from a geography standpoint. But thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about your current role at Active Brands and the company itself?
Yeah, sure. So Active Brands is a Norwegian private equity owned house of brands. So, it's owned by kind of two private equity funds, Verdane and FSN Capital, both Norwegian. And we own a portfolio of 6 outdoor brands, ranging from everything from Caritra, which is a brand that produces only female base layers, all the way to Sweet Protection, which is one of the most premium and high-end manufacturer of head protective gear. So mostly helmets and glasses for cycling, mountain biking, also sponsoring one of the Tour de France, so UCI teams, UNOX. And in my role, as I said before, I cover 2 areas. I cover brand marketing and digital marketing. So on one hand, I oversee all the marketing activities, the more traditional marketing activities across all 6 brands. And then I also lead a central e-commerce team with, the full P&L and business responsibility and operations. So everything that comes with that. And it's a really fun role because I get to do both, the best of both worlds. I get to be creative and I get to do, to work on brand positioning and how we enter new markets, identify consumer personas and so on. And at the same time, I'm also there to kind of drive the digital DTC business and have fun with that, especially in these current turbulent times that the DTC channel is going through.
So I'm assuming that, your background has prepared you for, like you said, this coming together of the two worlds of brand and digital. But I'm curious to hear about your background and how it's prepared you for this new role.
Yeah,
current role, I should say.
Yeah, it's a really kind of good Good question. I mean, I've started like ages ago my career in kind of media buying. So it's kind of, to simplify, I was selling online flash banners to agencies and clients on a website. So, and that sounds super like basic today, but it's only been 15 years ago actually. So how digital marketing advanced, it's astonishing. But yeah, I mean, prior moving to Active Brands, I think I spent a decade at Nike here in the EMEA headquarters in Amsterdam. And, my last role was I was the head of marketing for DTC for the whole of EMEA, where I was kind of in between the brand marketing teams and the kind of the DTC business, so the commercial team. So my team was really kind of like rolling out marketing campaigns and creating commercial campaigns across the DTC digital touch points. And this is where I was always intrigued. Okay, I was always still in marketing. I never had the commercial responsibility directly in terms of P&L management. So I was always like curious how it is, hey, what if you join everything under one leadership and under one kind of like organizational unit? Obviously, Nike is too big of a company to do that. You need kind of specialized teams. And that's why I was intrigued in this opportunity, because it kind of felt like, okay, everything that I've learned about marketing in my 15-year tenure, then the proximity to the business I had in Nike for the last 5 years, it felt like I want to earn my stripes and see how it is to drive the business as well as being a great marketeer. So it's definitely been fun and a interesting learning journey.
Yeah, and by the way, you're the first Slovenian that we have as a guest on the show. David, what pushed you? I think that very early on in your career to leave Slovenia and move. Did you move to? You didn't move to the Netherlands first, right?
No, I didn't move it straight away. I think, like, first of all, I'd be really surprised if there would be a Slovenian before me, because it's a small country, right? It's only 2 million people, so the chances of you having a lot of Slovenian guests is not really big. But yeah, no, I think I did kind of the opposite than most of my kind of like peers back then. Like, they went to study abroad and came back to Slovenia after their studies. I kind of went the other way around. So I finished my studies in University of Ljubljana, and then started my first job in Slovenia for like a bit under a year, as I said, selling online banners. And then one of my clients was an Austrian scale-up called Bet at Home, so kind of sport gambling and casino, poker, one of those companies. So I kind of moved over to Austria because I was really intrigued to work more in an international environment. So back then I moved over as a campaign manager for pan-European campaigns, which were basically just digital marketing focused on new customer acquisition. So did that for a year, and then eventually stayed in Austria, but moved to BMW, where I got kind of my first, let's say, role in a bigger brand as a kind of digital and new media manager, where I was kind of responsible for, digital brand management for both BMW and Mini brands in Central and Southeastern Europe. So I spent in total, I think, almost 4 years in Austria. And then kind of at that time, my wife was still in Slovenia. I was in Austria.
Wow.
I was based in Salzburg, Austria, which is not a big city, so there's not a lot of international opportunities there. So, we did what, you still do at 26. We were like, okay, we want to move somewhere where we can both get equal opportunities. And we were like, whoever gets a job in one of the bigger European cities, that's where we're going to move to. And then thanks to LinkedIn, I got the role at Nike eventually. And then we moved over to the Netherlands, where we've been ever since.
Going through digital transformation is hard and expensive. ChatGPT-like solutions automate and speed up almost everything. AI will replace all of our jobs soon. Are these statements all true, or just the newest myths? Meet the SoftServe Business Systems team. SoftServe Business Systems have been helping FMCG businesses worldwide to find the truth in a complicated tech environment for over 20 years now. By applying an exclusive digital transformation framework and offering a single, fully integrated AI-driven ecosystem of solutions, they know precisely what, when, and how to make technologies benefit your business. SoftServe Business Systems, Mythbusters of the FMCG world.
And you've done a lot of work in marketing, as you were pointing to, and also you've seen it evolve a lot. And when we look at digital marketing, which sounds kind of vintage to say digital marketing now, and and brand marketing, how have you seen like the different two, I don't know, if segments of the marketing mix evolve in the last few years? And do you think that this differentiation will exist in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I started in like marketing, it was all called marketing communication, and it was all everything from PR to media buying to digital. It was all in kind of one bucket, and then eventually, as digital developed in kind of multiple channels, ranging from paid search, the whole banner networks, and then new social media emerged. The technology got better in terms of websites, mobile apps developed. I think then digital became way more fragmented. So you had, at some point, at least that's what happened throughout my career, for example, at Nike, at some point, like companies started pulling digital marketing out of their traditional brand marketing or marketing communication departments, because it became, the beast became too big, and the skill sets required to successfully drive a digital marketing offense were very niche. Right? Some of them, it's a very different skill set if you want a great social media manager that will create you an engaging TikTok plan and a community, versus if you want somebody that will really just obsess, your return of marketing investment on performance marketing on Google and Meta ad networks, right? So I think with that, digital developed quite a lot, and that's why it kind of it grew from being the small younger brother to become like, at least the same age brother, the twin brother of, I think, more traditional brand marketing. But I think in my opinion, I think the most successful companies these days, or even in the marketeers that are from that traditional brand background, have recognized and really learned that actually digital is not the enemy, as maybe was the case 10 years ago when this kind of organizational splits happened, but actually it's one thing. And whilst, in bigger organizations, you can have siloed functional experts, the trick is that they all work as one team, right? I always like to use, 10 years at a sport brand, I always like to use football analogies. So it's like, a skill of a striker is different than a skill of a center back. Right. So, but in the end of the day, they both need to, with other players, they need to form that chemistry that, wins you the game and wins you the championship. And a little bit is the same with marketing, right? It's the trick is that you have that good blend of functional experts that know how to do, the traditional brand elements, so that they know how to dig consumer insights, create a brand persona.
Are you a savvy consumer insight professional with an interest in AI applications and market research?
Expression. At the same time, they also
discover
need to be
BullChat
mindful
AI,
of like
the pioneering AI-powered qualitative consumer research platform that's reshaping the consumer insight landscape.
Right? And for that, they usually need to rely on
Picture this
the
scenario:
expertise of their colleagues in the
effortlessly connecting with your target audience, posing bespoke questions, and receiving insightful responses to address your business queries, all neatly compiled into an actionable report within a mere 24 hours. BullChat AI streamlines the research process, enabling you to make agile, well-informed decisions at a fraction of the conventional cost. Curious to experience the efficiency firsthand? Visit www.bullchatai.com and embark on your free trial today.
No, absolutely. I think that's spot on. And I think to your point around the maturity level of the company, I think it depends on where they are on their digital transformation journey, right? Because it could be that you're talking to, one of the biggest companies in the world, but they're still fairly early on in that journey, and they are still quite separate. But I think you're right. The high performing companies are the ones where those two worlds start to come together. And actually, to that point, I'm really curious to get your perspective. Now that at Active Brands, you're responsible for both of these things, how do you see how have you been finding the balance between, let's call it, performance marketing and more of these brand building investment efforts? If you think about, the two sides of your role in terms of brand and digital.
I think there's pros and cons now to have it all together that I'm experiencing and learning myself, right? I think on paper, it's definitely easier to align both teams, right? Like the brand marketing activities and the kind of more 365 performance marketing activities to one calendar. I think that's I would say that's the biggest win, that we all kind of look at one concept map, one kind of brand map and brand calendar, and align the efforts and the investments accordingly. Now on paper that, or in theory that works, really well. I think then there is a little bit of a caveat that we are in the macroeconomic situation that we are at the moment, and we are, I think seeing some of the shifts that maybe or change of expectations that maybe COVID created, especially in kind of the e-commerce business, which then requires us to be a little bit more agile and look at the performance marketing sometimes a bit differently, because it's not like, oh, you're going to lock and load the plan, you lock and load the investments, and everything's going to go well. Because sometimes you do experience that, for example, the ROI is really poor because, as inflation drove up a lot of things, amongst others CPC prices in performance marketing. So suddenly, like, when you budgeted on a certain number, now mid through the year or mid through the quarter, you're actually realizing you're overspending on performance. So as somebody that's responsible for both, right, the good thing is that I can make a quick decision how to shift resources from one part to the other. But it's sometimes not my favorite decision when I need to kind of make a call that, hey, we need to divest from brand building, especially because we're a hyper growth company and we want to expand in new territories. You kind of don't want to jeopardize, or you want to protect your brand building activities at all costs. At the same time, performance marketing is very straightforward and black and white. You need to deliver a certain level of revenue in order to justify the investments. So if you start overspending, you're either gonna, commit to not reach that revenue target, or you need to look at the whole portfolio of investments and start to shifting some money around. So I think, I think that's been a challenging exercise. I think partially because of the economic situation we're in, but at the same time, I think the positive is that I can have a very quick and agile decision how to shift those budgets, right? Whereas, for example, in certain roles where I was just responsible for the marketing part, this process might have taken 2-3 weeks, and in 2-3 weeks you already overspend a lot, or you left a lot of the revenue on the table if you underinvested in performance marketing, right? That can also happen if you have like really favorable ROI. And I think in this kind of dual role, it allows me, together with our management team, to really be agile around it and really make decisions quickly, which I think it's a real benefit, especially in the current marketplace.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the fact before of like football players, right? Ones being the forward and the other ones being the defenders, which you before were in one position or another when you were in more functional roles at a big company like Nike. And now you've become, I don't know if to call it the referee or the manager, that decides where the investment goes to.
I would say more the manager. I think the referee does the cards, right? or at least it sounds more fancy to call yourself a manager.
That's true. That's true.
In the context of a football game, but it definitely gives more agile decision making. And I think in the current times where a lot of the things are dynamic, a lot of things are changing rapidly, from consumer behavior to the macroeconomic situation, and I think agility is really helpful. At least one thing that is favorable in the retail environment right now, right? Unlike the inventory levels and everything else, but let's not talk about that.
Whole other episode right there.
Yeah, let's not talk about that.
If anyone's listening and wants to come to talk about that, just get in touch with us. What about the DTC side? So, it's gone very rapidly from being the darling of the industry during the height of the pandemic, and big IPOs like Allbirds, for example, to really now having a question on the viability of that value proposition.
Yeah, I think I was kind of thinking about how I would best describe it, and I think I would say that DTC went from, hyper growth to headache for a lot of businesses. And I think, in my opinion, there's a very simple explanation to it. It's like, again, speaking for the kind of the sporting goods, retail industry, where you have, because it's linked a little bit to product creation and demand planning, right? I think, in the past, obviously digital was a growing channel, and then COVID came and it became a hyper growth channel. And the reason, again, it's quite simple. It's like people couldn't shop in stores. So of course they all transferred to digital. And you saw, for example, certain markets that were maybe a little bit less mature digitally. We saw that in Italy and Spain, for example, they over-indexed the growth during COVID compared to, let's say, the UK that was already kind of digitally quite mature. But nevertheless, it still experienced a double-digit growth. Now, you had 2 years of that. So when you go back, when you step away from the DTC organization and marketing for a little bit, you look at the product creation pipeline and the demand and supply planning, they were like, okay, great. So if we're seeing 20 to 40% growth, we create product for 12 months ahead. So let's create to fulfill that demand, right? Which is how the business was usually done, right? You looked at the past and the present to create the future. Now, the problem was that COVID ended at some point. And with that, also consumer behavior ended a little bit because stores opened again. And there's obviously there is a beauty of shopping physically.
Yeah.
People went back to shopping.
You remember everybody was saying, oh yeah, things will remain like this.
They talked about the death of physical retail, which was obviously highly exaggerated, right? So it's...
Exactly. So, stores reopening just by normal, right, would decrease the digital growth. But then also, I think, combined with the fact that consumers actually weren't allowed to or couldn't shop in stores, then made consumers experience and feel and touch the product even more than before. So that obviously cannibalized a little bit of the DTC growth in digital, right? I think if you look at the results, though, it's still like most of the companies are still doing like the good ones, like 3 to 6% year on year, or even 10% year on year growth. But then suddenly it feels like, oh, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's stagnating. I think, it's not enough also because I think then you combine it with, okay, you had, because of the forecasting that I described before, you had high inventory. So you started to go into, okay, we need to discount. In order to drive online sales, we need to discount. That eats the margins. Then you had, performance marketing costs went up due to inflation. So you got that. So that ate into the margin as well. And suddenly you look at the DTC, which was, the hyper growth and really, meaty gross margin, you start to go and actually, it's quite comparable with some, performing wholesale channels. So a lot of companies started to ask themselves, wait a minute, especially the ones that were catching up, right? I think, for example, at least with my experience, I think, nobody's doing amazingly well right now. But for example, I think Nike is still in a really strong position because, the growth there was not a coincidence. It was engineered, and the whole machine and the whole organization is willing to support it a bit better. But I think especially certain companies that are not on that maturity level of digital business are really starting to question, is like, should we even invest in DTC, or should we, maybe have a different strategy? Because there are certain cases coming out of the last couple of years, like Hoka and On Running, that actually grew. Unlike, Nike and Adidas in DTC, they grew through speciality, and only now kind of are like, okay, we also have a fair and a healthy share of the DTC business. So it's definitely a dilemma. But I would say, though, that I think DTC, regardless of the maturity or the state of the channel, I do think it forces all the companies to think consumer first. It forces them to have that direct dialogue to the consumer. And even though, I encourage everyone to think about, like, even though you might not want to make that your, crown jewel of a sales channel, you should think about what the positioning of that channel is, because at the end of the day, I truly believe it helps companies to operate in a more consumer-centric way. Which if you're only wholesale focused, it's a bit harder because you never have that direct connection with the consumer and that direct feedback from the consumer, right? You only get the feedback from the account, and that can be slightly different to what the end consumer is saying.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're alluding to and what you're explaining really well is the need to really think about things from a route to market through an omni-channel lens, right? Which is like, it's not all or nothing in terms of either D2C or wholesale. I think it's the fact, like you said, understanding the role of each of these channels and using that channel effectively to accomplish that role or to complete that role. So you mentioned specialty a little while back, and I'm curious to get your perspective, given what you've said around how the world has changed post-COVID and now at Active Brands, what the role of independent specialty stores has been in terms of your commercial go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. I think it's about an integrated marketplace strategy. It's about like every company, every brand defining the role of each channel. And specialty is playing a key role. And I think especially when you go to more performance categories, or, for us in the kind of outdoor business, like some of the brands are very, very focused on high performance. We have the cross-country skiing brand, which is, very niche, but very performance focused. And I think the role of specialty stores becomes very, very important when you build those kind of high performance verticals, because you get access to an audience that is a customer of that store or that retail landscape for a reason, because usually they get access to not just product but also to a network of community store staff that is probably very highly trained on certain product, right? And can really help them find the right hiking jacket or the right snowboarding helmet, right? Because it's a technical purchase. And that's, I think, a little bit harder to do, for example, in DTC, especially if you don't have your own stores, right? If you're just an online DTC players, like Active Brands, for example, then you don't have that physical contact. You don't have that notion of community that you can bring together and you can really kind of look and touch the product. And I think this is a really important role of specialty stores, is to get connection with the consumers that it would be very hard to acquire or convert to a DTC consumer, because they would they do most of the time shop cross brands in those spaces. And I also feel like there is an opportunity if trade marketing through specialty stores is done right. I think it's a very effective brand building channel. And I think in the time where not a lot of companies have money to invest in buying media for brand building, you kind of look at those specialty stores to really be a place where not only you get in touch with the right consumers, but you can also start building the brand through store experiences, right? And I think for companies that don't own a fleet of own stores, I think it could be a very efficient way to start building and creating that brand storytelling in a point of sale in a very authentic way. And as I said, I think a lot of big players during COVID or even before were starting to move out the niche specialty retailers, which created, for example, I think Hoka and On are a good example, created space for these new brands that use specialty retail to grow in a very authentic and niche segment running that was not necessarily, well, somebody left the back door open, let me put it like that.
Yeah.
And now they're not moving away from specialty, right? They just started to build their DTC arm and opening their own stores, but they kind of knew where to grow. And that's, when you mention omni-channel and that integrated marketing strategies, it was an interesting market entry. I think it's a good case because, it's not like the big players like Adidas and Nike and Under Armour don't know how to do specialty. They just maybe turned a blind eye for a few years because the focus was somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's awesome on a lot of levels, because I think it's ultimately, I think it's something of customer experience, right? Like really having that, because personalized experience, because we were talking about personalization before COVID in terms of in-store personalization and so on, but we were always thinking about it in very technological terms, whereas here's like personalization on a human level, like one-to-one communication, interaction, and getting like recommendations that the store specialist that knows the product, knows the consumer is giving you. Plus, I think it's also a very good news for society in the way that it encourages entrepreneurship at the at the lowest, not the lowest level, but I mean like at a very human, attainable level, no, of starting your own store, for example.
Yeah, I think maybe depends a bit on the. I mean, I know certain kind of categories better than others, but there's running specialty stores that,
yeah, for example,
don't just sell running product, but they created a community, or they actually created running as a sport. They made it. They helped in building its popularity, and you have a lot of this. Back in the days, run crews in London, in Copenhagen, in Berlin that were linked to a category specialty doors, and these guys made running cool back then.
Yeah.
Before that, running wasn't perceived as cool, and now in the kind of business that I am with outdoors, how many like little ski shops are there that that snowboarder that's now winning the X Games, got its first boots and bindings there, and it's there is so much more than just a store, right? It's a proper community that is also has a very positive effect on advocacy, on developing the sport or the category, which I think is also a very nice, especially when we talk about sport, right? It's a nice benefit for the society.
Yeah, because in these more technical categories, there's a lot of conversation about building a community and how strategically important it is. Like, what would you consider in like in literal terms, if you like, what does it mean to build a community, and ultimately, what are the benefits for brands? Like, how does this kind of virtuous circle work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the definition of community for brands it varies a lot, right? Like, I think digitally, I would say, hey, what is a good community digitally? I would argue, yeah, that you have a really healthy database of your member contacts. You can contact them through email and other channels that are available. That you treat them and give them the added value. So I think first and foremost, you always need to ask yourself is like, if I'm a member of your loyalty club or if I'm a member of your community, what do I get in return? Because I think that today everybody's asking you to sign up or to basically give your personal data one way or another. But it's always the question is like, how do you create a simple consumer experience, right? That gives the consumer enough benefits to make their worthwhile, or to be subscribed to an email or to just kind of register for the program. And I think it doesn't need to be too complicated. I think it needs to be, every brand needs to ask themselves like, what do I stand for as a brand? And a lot of the times, people are fans of brands because of their product. So I think a lot of like the benefits and a lot of kind of community aspects should be about build around either the product or the sport in that case, because that's what ultimately will bring people together. I think physically, is maybe is a little bit. I don't think. It's not a little bit different, but I think it's a different way how do you build the experiences, right? So I think, as I said, if you have your own DTC stores or a good specialty network partner, it's like, how do you then bring the tip of the iceberg of your, let's say, digital community together on a regular basis, also physically, right? And almost make those as your kind of like brand ambassadors, because I think a lot of those, again, going back to sport, because that's where my background is, right? But I think the run clubs from the kind of like early 2000s that are now actually coming back are actually really a good example of like how a brand drives a notion and a sense of community around a physical touch point that then can be used for storytelling and for further engagement digitally with content and experiences and so on. So it's a little bit the same as community is a little bit the same as marketplace. It's not about online and offline, but it's about how do you create a a unified experience that goes across all channels, but then with a slightly different expression and execution, obviously digitally versus physically.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about what you're mentioning around community is that there's a common thread that runs through a lot of those examples you referenced in like the digital and physical, which is emotional connection and passion, right?
Yeah.
Is that there's always that kind of that's almost like the underlying layer that connects all these things, right? Is that like you mentioned the running clubs? I mean, part of the reason those are so powerful and places for storytelling is the fact that like it's built on an emotional connection and values that people share in that community. So I think it's really interesting to hear you mention that. I want to take us back to a point we talked about with regards to the role of the specialty stores and actually open it up a little bit to think about D2C and wholesale, right? So thinking about more like a broader definition of your route to market and thinking about how you see that evolving, both now but also into the future in terms of like the D2C, the role of D2C versus some of your other commercial channels.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and obviously, like I don't have the answer of how it's going to be in probably.
This is the crystal ball part of our podcast.
I mean, I think I'm going to go back to and this is something maybe I'm a bit more. When I was just having a marketing role, maybe I didn't see that as important as I see it now in a more dual role, marketing, commercial. I think first and foremost, I think product goes back to product. So if you look at your integrated marketplace consisting of DTC and wholesale, I think the key of having a successful integrated marketplace strategy is to do a smart product differentiation. I think it's a really kind of this cookie cutter approach that you have an assortment and you just kind of plaster it across all channels and then expect, DTC is going to continue to grow even if it's 5% a year. It's not going to work because as I said, you're kind of margin. You kind of want to protect the margin there, and you don't want to go into a discount war if your retailer has the same product. So I think that's the first kind of, I would say, the first unlock to a successful go-to-market strategy is to really look at your assortment and segment the created assortment segmentation. And it doesn't need to be on an SKU level. It sometimes can only be on the colorway level or in the quantities or units. But really ensuring that, okay, there is a role for your big box retail, there is a role for your specialty retail, and then there is a role for your DTC, right? And ensuring that there is a clear assortment or product segmentation for each of the channels that supports the role of that, right? If you say, okay, I'm going to build loyalty through DTC, I'm going to build, authentic connection with my core consumer in specialty, and I'm going to scale my product in big box retail. Okay, then create your product pipeline and segmentation to support that. Because I think the worst thing is that you have a strategy for each channel, and then what's the product? It's the same everywhere. And then you're like, okay, big box retail, goes out 20% over recommended retail price on day one. Specialty doesn't want to sell it because they know they won't sell it, and then your DTC is kind of like, oh, you need to grow and you need to overinvest, so you end up overspending on performance marketing because you're selling a product that's 20% cheaper from the get-go somewhere else, and you also don't want to discount it because you're gonna have the sales team calling you saying, well, if we discount on DTC, then they're gonna go down from 20% to 30%. And then eventually you're gonna like just be an unprofitable business. So I think that's the best way to avoid that is to really look at the segmentation of product assortment and to support the strategy of each of the sales channel. I think that's always been the case. I think maybe it was a bit forgotten in times of COVID because it was maybe limited to digital channels, and then assortments were just getting wider and wider and wider because they could all just be dumped in one channel. I think, and now it's time to segment it again, and also looking at how do you grow. I think a lot of companies make this mistake that they're very opportunistic and growing product assortment vertically, so just adding new categories versus saying, okay, no, we're going to stay true to what we are. We're going to stay true to the things that consumers love us, and we're going to go deeper, and we're going to try to see how we can get better in selling more volume and finding distribution that's going to support it, as opposed to just, oh, let's just add a category because there is, I don't know, padel is currently popular, so let's just make a padel line just to get into that store, just to serve that consumer. And then in the end, that's where you kind of build up your inventory and, eventually gonna have to clear it at some point. So
it's the long tail, right? I mean, there's cost associated with managing that kind of a growing product assortment, right? And sometimes the return's not there.
Yeah, but sometimes maybe it's on paper, and in the short run, it seems easier to grow like that.
True.
It seems like so opportunistic it's so much easier if we just add that. We're gonna get a buy-in, and then as soon as you're gonna be in season and you're not gonna have sell-through, then you're like, oops. But by then it's already too late, right? Because of the product creation cycle, you have to work at least 12 months in advance. So you can't just pull the line for the next season. You only can pull it for 2 or 3 seasons ahead. So I think that's one thing that I'm at least very vocal always about it. Like, hey, when you grow around the product assortment and categories that consumers like, and you resonate, and you have a good kind of reputation. Don't get tempted to create longer and longer tails of new category products, because in the long run it will hurt you and bite you back.
And what about the people aspect? So you've been leading teams for quite some time now, and you've done so in growth environments, non-growth environments. How do you keep people engaged and motivated in these type of contexts? And I mean, now especially that you are really in a C-level role with multiple layers of people, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think I won't lie, I mean, the last kind of 1.5, 2 years have been tough, right? I mean, I've when we went into COVID and the lockdown, I felt like managing teams was challenging, because I'm a very people's person. So I like to have a lot of conversations. I like to kind of be together with people. I think that's where I kind of lead the best. So when that happened, it was a really interesting transition to suddenly, you have no physical contact and you need to still keep people motivated and inspired, despite the very gloomy, outlook that we had at that time. And I thought that was hard. And then I kind of like came into the kind of the real back into real life post-COVID, and I found it, for example, managing and keeping people motivated in today's macroeconomic environment way harder, because I kind of feel like to the conversation we had before, like nobody's overgrowing right now, right? And if they are, then usually the profitability is not amazing. So you're kind of like, it may seem like you're winning on one side, but you're not. So overall, it's really hard to win. And this is not just by leading teams, also by keeping myself motivated and inspired. It's like, how do you stay, motivated, and how do you stay energetic in an environment where no matter how hard you work, the best you get is a draw. Right, is a little bit like that. Like it's playing a football game, and like you're playing hard for 90 minutes, and the only thing you get is a draw. And even that draw is like a deflection of a defender, so you're not really proud of that draw either. So that to me has been a most challenging thing, and really motivating people to see the big picture and to see the future. Because sometimes you only look at the next week and the next retail quarter and are so focused on that, and that number is always, sometimes it's green, sometimes it's orange, sometimes it's red, but it's more the warm colors than the green color. I think my kind of leadership style in those situations is always like, I always like to be honest and transparent, right? And describe the situation how it is. Not take it too serious. I mean, not take yourself too seriously, because I think otherwise you can create even more pressure. And I think the role of leaders in those type of situations is to try to create a more safe and a more calm environment, and not add fuel to the fire and not add pressure. So that's where I try to stay focused, of really, being positive, and also, ensuring that, hey, everything in the life is in cycles and we're just in a bad cycle right now. So let's not get too caught up about the cycle, but let's also don't try to forget to enjoy it, and then celebrate things that maybe are not linked to the direct business impact, right? And sometimes you do so many things at work that you forget about, oh, if you change a operational thing in the way how marketing is structured, if you hire some new and very talented people, that's also a reason to celebrate, right? It's also a win. So really trying to think about, okay, we need to look at our output holistically, not just as the number end of the month or end of the quarter, and really try to be happy about those things, right? Like we relaunched, for example, the websites for all four brands. So that was the moment to celebrate, so trying to really find every moment and every opportunity to celebrate things if the business is a bit shakier.
Yeah. So what I love about your answer, David, is that you show how leadership is a very multifaceted type of tasks, right? Because like you said, you have to have a view of the long and the short term. You have to think about, delivering on those business results while also taking the time to celebrate those, and enjoy those small micro moments through the day, not just for you, but for your entire organization. So it's a lot of things on a business leader's plate, like yourself. We have one more question that we ask. And first off, wanted to thank you because we could talk for hours about all the things you mentioned here. I definitely will be following up with you just to pick your brain more about a couple of those things. But there's one question that we ask all of our guests, and it's actually kind of building on a lot of the things you've already talked about, which is if you could go back in time and you could give yourself one piece of advice, knowing everything that you've learned over your career, and you think about what would be that one piece of advice you'd give to young David as he was coming out of university in Slovenia, what would it be?
I think I would say, say yes to every opportunity that you get. And I, if I look at my journey, I think I said yes quite a lot, but there was a few no's in between. And now that I'm, 20 years later, I wish some of those no's would be yeses, because I think not that I didn't have a successful career thus far, but I think it would just be even a little bit more adventurous. I think that would be one of my advice to my younger self, is just to say yes to really do everything. Because when you're young, there's way less you have to lose, right? And you're alone, you don't have a family, so it's way easier to also course correct if certain things are not working out.
This was David Pivk from Active Brands. Ephraim, what are your key takeaways from the outdoors?
Well, I think first off, it was really interesting to hear him talk about Active Brands and this house of brands that they have and how they're in all these different very interesting categories. I almost feel like I should go to him and ask him for some advice in terms of like what bike helmet I should buy, or like, what high tech or, ski wear I should buy as well.
Well, David, here's a shout out from Ephraim when you listen to this.
Yeah, no doubt. David, I'll be reaching out to you. We're both in Amsterdam. No, but in all seriousness, I think it's really fascinating to hear him talk about their approach, or the approach that he's taken in having both brand and commerce under his watch, if you will. And it's really fascinating to hear about how, he's really thinking about how he brings these two worlds together in a lot of ways in terms of like integrated marketing, and thinking about, it was really fascinating to hear him talk about how D2C is a really great place to have to really learn about some like what I would consider business fundamentals around like supply chain and merchandising and these kinds of things that he's been able to apply now in his expanded roles.
Yeah, which ultimately the way that he put the future of the industry and the channel split was really like with a merchandising point of view about assortments, etc. Which I didn't see that answer coming, but I thought it was super interesting.
Well, it's just fascinating to see, that his general manager mindset really shone through in regards to a lot of the things he talked about as well. And I think, that starts with when we talked with him about his route to market strategy and how he wants to think about, making sure that they offer clear product differentiation when they think about what they offer through D2C or what they may offer through large modern trade stores or what they offer through specialty stores, and really relying on that as opposed to promotions. Because I think, as we talked about with David, that's just the path to the bottom, right? So like, who can get there first?
Yeah, and also one thing that I thought was funny that he said that direct to consumer went from hyper growth to headache for a lot of businesses. So now it's kind of finding its place in that equation, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, what tends to happen, and we saw a lot of this obviously during COVID, is that people tend to overstate certain things. So I know, when we were talking about things during COVID with regards to e-com, we always used to say it's an accelerator, right? And that, it's accelerated an existing trend. And now what we find is that as people come back to shopping in physical stores, it's decelerated a little bit, but it's still there. Neither one of those things is going to away. Neither physical retail nor e-com or D2C is going to go away.
Yeah, what I loved about this conversation is how these more like technical brands build communities, and the importance that they have, both digitally, but also how they translate physically, and that these communities really become brand ambassadors. This kind of started with run clubs in the early 2000s, and that's coming back. It can be used for storytelling and can be very effective.
Well, and I think that concept of communities is a great illustration of the two worlds of brand marketing and digital kind of coming together, right? Because from a digital side, it's about, the data and being able to understand people at every step on their consumer journey. But at the same time, there's obviously a very high human touch element to communities as well, right? In terms of people want to be around others who share their passion for running or for whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Efrain, as always, for your takeaways. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave a review on your on your favorite podcast player, and we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG, guys. Cheers.